I have always been of the opinion that you cannot change people. You cannot try to change people, and you should not try to change people. As a matter of fact, if you are like me and you've tried to change a certain aspect of yourself, you would be quite sympathetic to the idea of changing other people because you would know how hard it is to change yourself. You know, the cake, you say, I'm on a diet. And when you see the cake, you go for the cake. The drinks, when you say, I'm going to be faithful to this dream, when you are invited out, you end up having a few drinks. The various things we set as goals, we struggle to achieve those goals because it's really hard to either develop a habit or to break an existing habit. So don't try to change people, but be very specific about who you are and where you're going. And at the start of every relationship, put your honest thoughts on the table. And here is perhaps the most important part of today's session. If the person does not accept what you've painted as a canvas, your past, your failures, your present, your dreams, your future, the baggage you have, if they do not accept all of that in its entirety, you are with and you are dealing with and you've chosen the wrong person. And that is an important, I would say, time for you to stop, reappraise, not with the intention of trying to see what aspects of yourself you can change. Don't try to change yourself. Stop and allow yourself to come to terms with the fact that you've chosen the wrong person. Relationships are not supposed to be about compromise. Most people have been raised with this false, stupid philosophy of marriage is supposed to be a compromise. Relationships are supposed to be a compromise. That's utter bullshit, nonsense. Relationships are not about compromise. Compromise becomes a lifestyle because compromise leads to a path of constant adaptation. Adaptation could be something you do, but shouldn't be something that becomes a part of your life. Now recognize something, that if the man does not change to get you before the relationship begins, he will not change to keep you. And similarly, if the woman does not change before the relationship begins, she will not change when the relationship has started. So keep in mind that the day before the wedding, the day before the relationship is official, there is no difference between that day and the following day when the marriage or the ceremony takes place. You are still the same person. If you're to marriage, you're simply a well-dressed person, either wearing a nice tux or wearing a beautiful wedding gown. You're still the same person. You're bringing the same head into the relationship, but there's a slight difference. Those habits and behaviors you're bringing into the relationship, before you were married, before you were in a relationship, let's say you were coasting on the freeway at maybe 20 miles an hour. So you could actually stop at any time because certain people would not have tolerated such a behavior. Marriage creates this false delusion because once you're married, the same bad habits come with you, but this time around you're moving at maybe 70 miles an hour and you're moving in the opposite direction, which means there's potentially a likely scenario that will occur, a bad accident. That accident would happen because at some point, one of the two of you will get to the point where you say, I feel choked, I feel trapped, I feel as though someone is strangling me, because for so many years, you've been living a false life. You've been living to a narrative that has been painted by the other person. Now, irrespective of whether you are a man or whether you are a woman. Relationships are not about compromise. Now, in my scenario, I always say what I will not tolerate in advance. I do not make ultimatums. I do not make demands. I do not set my expectations on the other person. I just simply say, this is who I am. This is what I believe. This is what I want. And if there is something I do not want in a woman, if there is a behavior that I do not want, if there is a look that I will not tolerate, I simply say, I don't see myself, and I cannot see myself being in a relationship with someone with that behavior. Now, I don't say I want you to change, because you can't change people. All I can do is tell you what I will tolerate. And therefore, this simply means that when you meet people, the idea should not be to identify, and this is perhaps one of the most important things men get wrong. The idea should not be to identify where your values align. This is a process of inversion. You don't choose a spouse, a mate, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a partner, based on similarities in value. Although I will say, shared values and complementary skills are important. But the success of the relationship necessitates a process of inversion where you say, where do we disagree the most? And not, can I tolerate our disagreements? Not tolerate. You're not trying to tolerate someone for 50 years. Well, good luck. Identify where you have divergences in goals, expectations, visions. Because here is the saying, how can two walk together except they agree? If you are unequally yoked, the marriage, the relationship will fail. It's simply a matter of time. Or one person will change themselves so badly to the point where at some point in the future, they resent the other person so strongly. That changing process sometimes comes in the form of bullying, but very subtle bullying. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that people should not seek for self-improvement or should not seek to improve the people they love. But there is a big difference between trying to make someone their best self and trying to make someone into what you believe is their best self. Women by nature like to make over men. If you find out that you're with someone who likes to make you over or fits anything I've said so far, let me leave you with a parting recommendation. Man up, find your balls, and speak up. Now, the speaking up should not be for you to start a dialogue. The speaking up should simply be to say 1, 2, or 3 words. I'm out. I'm done. It's over. Goodbye. And the reason is simply because 50 years is too long a time for you to be unhappy. Now, my observation is, even amongst very young people that I know who are married people are often some of the most unhappy, lonely people I've ever seen. Weird, for some reason. Strange. The first 2 years is great. The remaining 40, 50 years is hell on earth. The most lonely, the most frustrated, the saddest people in majority of the cases that I ever meet. There is no individual freedom. This is the whole point I keep making, that there is no benefit to you, the man, being married, because you can remain unmarried and be happy, or you can go into marriage or a relationship and have to face the possibility of so much pain. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, of course. Have I met some of those exceptions? Absolutely. Have I been blessed to have met some of those exceptions? Absolutely. But guess what? The exception does not disprove the rule. Yes, some of us get lucky, but luck is not a strategy. Sometimes it's simply that most people are well paired. I don't like the word soulmates, but you're well paired. There's a maturity amongst both of you, and therefore both of you are happy to treat the other with some dignity and with some respect, without needing to change the other person. Now, I'll leave you with a parting closing statement. If you are in a relationship, and it's a new relationship, and she's trying to get you to stop playing video games, stop smoking weed, stop driving that bike. I've had friends who've been told, well, you have to get rid of your sports car and buy a more reasonable family car. If she's trying to get you to stop playing a sport, I have historically left women who tried to stop me from dancing. I said, well, if I have to choose, sorry, you have to go. I've had women who suggested that I stop doing karate so actively. They had to go. It wasn't a hard decision. There were other women who tried to stop me from doing certain habits. It's very easy. There's the door. Off you go. No negotiation, no compromise, because I realized if you cede territory, that is often the beginning of a downfall. Because the way bullies work is they walk up to you where the line has been drawn, and they push and they walk away. And if you say nothing, they come back and they push even further and they walk away. And if you say nothing, next time they come and they smack you on the head. And suddenly you're now a victim to a behavior that you controlled. Effectively, let's not say you controlled. You volunteered in such a behavior. Now, I hope today's session doesn't make it sound as though I'm making men out to be victims. Recognize that in my mind, in my philosophy, there are no victims in life. There are only volunteers. You and I are volunteers in every relationship we go into. I am simply saying, as a volunteer, define the vision. Don't categorize it into villains and victims. Define your vision. Remain a volunteer, but define the terms for which you would allow the game to be played. And if you believe, irrespective of how beautiful the woman is or how great she is, if you feel for one reason that she might be controlling, or she might get you to give up who you are, move on, wish her well, and hopefully she'll find some other sucker that she can make over. In closing, I've talked about men for the last hour or less. Inverse the principle, and the same applies to women. I would even say that there are some women who are just too great, just too loving, too kind, too sincere, that they allow the man to walk all over them simply because of love. You see, more harm has been done in this world as a result of that four-letter word, love. Believe me, love does not get the job done. It doesn't. It never will. It's never sufficient. It's an important ingredient. If you take out love, it's not quite the same. But if you only include love, it's also not quite the same. So women should also realize that all of what I've shared so far applies to you with some subtle changes. I would say the most important changes has to do with the age. Rather than 30 and 35, the woman should be 27. Don't get married until 27. From 28, start committing to a relationship. Between 28 and 30, do not get married Do not have children in the first 3 years. Give yourself time to live with a person to understand if this is the right person. So at 28, you can be married. Between 18 and 28, that is your time to become your best self. Don't give up on your dreams. I guess I've said so many times I'm coming to a close, but let me say this, particularly for the ladies. My experience of dating and observing women has been a lot of women give up on marriage and the traditional institution of marriage and being wives because they believe they will give up everything that they ever dreamed about. And I can understand that feeling. You should never, ever, ever give up yourself. Not for marriage, not for a man, and not for a baby. Never. But if you follow my tenets, you can achieve your 10,000 hours by age 27, so you can become proficient and a professional in an area of life, which will mean that even if you get married at 28, let me talk about this in its entirety. Forgive me for going extra longer, but I think this is important. What are the tenets for women? The same thing I said about men. Number one, between 18 and 27, do not be married. Do not get married before age 27. Do not have kids before age 27. You should be on birth control always, irrespective of the partner you have. Do not move in with a man before age 27. Do not date a man in a mono relationship before age 27. Do not date a single father who has kids before age 27. Do not commit, whatever the reason, to any relationship before age 27. Sow your wild oats. Have a list of men you want. Every now and then, if you need a booty call, great. Have them come service you if you need that. If you want to have no partner, great. It's your decision. You start from 18 to 22, 5 years for yourself, 1 year to travel. From 23 to 27, you have your 5 years. You can achieve 10,000 hours of practice, which means you'll become proficient at anything in life. At 27, you've achieved mastery. 28, you can start considering relationships. If you want to have a family and you start dating at 28, do not date for more than 6 to 1 year, 6 months to a year. During that period, you only move in with a man if he is committed to marry you and he is proposed, with a wedding date within the next 12 months. Start this long-term dating is nonsense. 28, let's say you get married. Let's say he starts to court you at 27. 28, you get married. Do not have kids in the first 3 years of the marriage. So you have 28, 29, 30. For you and your husband, enjoy yourselves. Travel, see the world, create memories, because at some point you will need to go back into the bank account and draw down on the good times, because there will be lean times in the future. 3 years, don't have kids. And what that means is that you can start having kids from 30. Age 30. Now, let's start from 18 again. 18 to 30. You waited just like the man. You haven't started having children, which means if you start having kids, if you choose to, let's say you want to have 2 kids, great, 2 kids, age 31, age 32, boom, you're done. 2 years out of work. The kids have to grow. Let's say you decide to stay at home for the first 3 years to look after the kids before they go to daycare. That takes you from 32 to 35. That technically means that from 30 to 35, you've only been out of the job market for 5 years. You haven't given up who you are. You've only taken out 5 years of your life to be a mother. At 35, the kids can start going to preschool. You can go back to work. Remember, you already achieved mastery at age 27. 5 years. But between 27 and 30, you have 3 additional years. So you've had 8 years of work experience. You're technically proficient in an area of life. 35, you've had your 2 kids if you want 2. And here's a recommendation. Enough with this 1 child this year and another child in 5 years. No, go 1, 2. Get them out. Get them out. It's done. Get your life back. 35, you're back to work. And that simply means that you don't define yourself as a mother only. This is the concern most women have. Now, there is a saying that whatever defines you limits you. And whatever you define yourself by places a limit on you. You can be a professional and a mother. Make no mistake, you can't be exceptionally great at both. It's both a full-time job. But the point I'm making is by 35, you can be back to work. You can work from 35 to 40, which would mean you had 8 years before you had your kids. You had another 5 years post your kids. That's 13 good years. That takes you to 40. At 40, you can decide how you want to lead the rest of your life and what you want to do. Do you want to be a full-time mom, or do you want to be a part-time, full-time mom? You get to decide, and that way you're not giving up on your dream. And you're not looking to the man as though you've actually given up and given him everything that made you a special woman. This stuff is not really complicated. We just have to sit down, recognize that that nature plays and deals a very tragic hand to each and every one of us. And why have I gone through this process of trying to explain the female side? The reason is simply because I care as much about women as I do about men. My target audience is simply men. In any case, the reason for this strictness, you might call it strictness to my tenets, is simply by 30, assuming you have your kids, the 2 kids at 32, you've had both kids before, way before geriatric pregnancy, high risk pregnancy, which begins from 35. See, that way you can have your cake and you can eat it. Most young women are raised in this feminist, womanist ideology that you are like men and you can make that decision whenever you're ready. So most women are waiting until 35 and 37 before they say, now I'm ready to have kids and now I'm ready for the man. And unfortunately, nature gets to decide. A man can wait till he's 60 and have kids. A woman, in my opinion, should not play that same game of chance. Nature looks very, very, very differently at both the man and the woman. So keep in mind, you don't have to give up your dreams. You don't have to give up who you are, and you should not give up who you are. Adaptation should never be a lifestyle. Now, I hope that's been useful. I went on for much longer than I thought I would, and I apologize for that.